Josephine Blackwood stared at her reflection in the ornate mirror, barely recognizing the woman who gazed back. The elegant white gown, the expertly applied makeup, the intricate up to all of it seemed to belong to someone else. To Camilla. Her sister, who should have been wearing this dress today. "It's almost time," her mother said, adjusting the veil with trembling hands. "Remember everything we discussed, Joe? You must be convincing." Joe nodded, her throat too tight for words. 24 hours ago, her life had been normal. Then Camilla had disappeared, leaving only a hastily scribbled note. "I can't do this. I'm sorry." Their father's business was on the verge of collapse. And this marriage to Thomas Reynolds, the unassuming millionaire, was meant to save them all. He won't know the difference, her father had insisted when proposing the desperate plan. Thomas has only met Camilla twice, both times at formal events with dozens of people. "You look similar enough, and he's simple," her mother had added. With a dismissive wave, inherited everything from his father. Keeps to himself. Probably won't notice if you don't act exactly like Camilla. Now, standing at the back of the church, Joe felt her heart hammering against her ribs. This was fraud. This was wrong. But what choice did she have? Her family would lose everything. "Ready?" her father whispered, offering his arm. The music swelled. The doors opened. And there at the altar stood Thomas Reynolds, a tall, broad-shouldered man in an impeccably tailored suit. His expression was mild, almost vacant, his eyes downcast. Just as described, wealthy but unremarkable, as she approached. He finally looked up, and Joe felt a jolt of something unexpected, his eyes deep brown, with flecks of gold, were surprisingly intense, studying her for one unnerving moment before the placid expression returned. "You look beautiful, Camilla," he said softly when she reached him. "Thank you," she whispered, the name feeling like a betrayal on her lips. The ceremony passed in a blur. Vows were exchanged, rings slipped onto fingers, signatures made on legal documents. By sunset, Josephine Blackwood had become Mrs. Reynolds, and her family business had received its first substantial investment. "I know this isn't what you wanted," Thomas said quietly as they rode to his estate, "but I'll make you comfortable." Joe studied him from the corner of her eye, seemed genuinely kind, if somewhat detached. Perhaps this wouldn't be so terrible. After all, the Reynolds estate was impressive, but understated. A sprawling colonial home set among manicured gardens. Thomas showed her to her room, her own room, he emphasized, until she was ready for anything else. "Dinner's at 7, he said, lingering at the doorway. "Join me if you'd like." Lone Joe sat heavily on the edge of the bed. Guilt and relief warred within her. Thomas seemed decent and far from the simpleton her parents had described. Perhaps merely shy or socially awkward. As she unpacked, a small envelope fell from between her clothes, Camilla's handwriting. "I'm sorry to leave you with this burden, Joe, but there's something off about him, something dangerous. Be careful." Joe frowned, rereading the cryptic warning as a soft knock sounded at her door. "Mrs. Reynolds," a maid called. "Mr. Reynolds asked me to provide you with these." She handed Joe a stack of papers, business documents for the Blackwood company, already showing Thomas's substantial investment and restructuring plans. Joe's eyes widened at the sophisticated financial strategy outlined within. Perhaps Thomas Reynolds wasn't quite as simple as everyone believed. The morning light streamed through the curtains as Joe awoke in her new bedroom. For a disorienting moment, she forgot where she was, then reality crashed back. She was Josephine Reynolds now, married to a man who thought she was her sister. Breakfast was a quiet affair. Thomas read the financial section of the newspaper, occasionally making notes in the margins with a silver pen. He answered her attempts at conversation politely but briefly, before excusing himself. "I have meetings today," he explained. "Feel free to explore the house. Martha will show you anything you need." Martha, the stern-faced housekeeper, gave Joe a perfunctory tour. The house was beautiful, but felt more like a museum than a home perfectly arranged but impersonal. No family photos, no mementos, nothing to suggest the personality of its owner. "And this wing is private," Martha said firmly when they reached a locked corridor. "Mr. Reynolds doesn't allow anyone inside, not even his wife." Joe asked. "Martha single? What's..." Expression tightened, especially not his wife. The comment lingered with Joe as she wandered the gardens later that afternoon. What kind of man kept secrets from his wife on their first day of marriage? A groundskeeper tipped his hat as she passed. "Afternoon, Mrs. Reynolds. Settling in all right?" "Yes, thank you," she replied. "Have you worked for Mr. Reynolds long? Going on 5 years now," he said, "since he returned from overseas?" Overseas? This was new information. The groundskeeper looked suddenly uncomfortable. Probably shouldn't be gossiping. "Good day, ma'am." That evening, Joe heard voices from Thomas's study and argument in a language she didn't recognize. When she rounded the corner, she found Thomas alone, phone in hand, expression thunderous. "Camilla," he said, instantly composing himself. "Did you need something?" "Just wondering about dinner," she improvised. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'll join you shortly." At dinner, Thomas was charming, asking about her interests and sharing stories of his travels. But Joe couldn't shake the feeling that he was playing a role just as she was. "I noticed you have no family." "Photos," she ventured. "I was an only child. My parents died years ago." He refilled her wine glass. "Tell me about your family. You and your sister must be close." The question felt like a trap. "Close enough," she said carefully, though different in many ways. His eyes lingered on her face. "How so?" "Camilla is more impulsive. I'm more analytical." The moment the words left her mouth, Joe realized her mistake. She had spoken as herself, not as her sister. Thomas merely nodded. But something in his expression shifted. That night, Joe couldn't sleep. Slipping from her room, she wandered the dark hallways until she found herself before the locked corridor. To her surprise, the door was slightly ajar. A sliver of light visible within. Heart pounding, she pushed it open and stepped inside. The corridor led to a room lined with filing cabinets and bookshelves. A large desk dominated the center, covered with documents in various languages. On the wall hung a massive corkboard with newspaper clippings, photographs and strings connecting them in an intricate web. At the center was a photo of a man Joe recognized as a prominent senator, with notes about his voting patterns and financial backers. "What are you doing in here?" Joe whirled around. Thomas stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "I got lost," she lied. The door was open. "Martha tells me you've been asking questions." He stepped closer. "About me. About the house." "I'm just trying to know my husband better." He studied her intently. "Are you? Or are you looking for something specific?" Josephine. Her blood ran cold. He knew. Asterisk, "How long have you known?" Joe asked, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. Thomas closed the door behind him, trapping them both in his secret study. Since before the wedding, then why go through with it? He moved to his desk, meticulously straightening papers without taking his eyes off her. "I needed a connection to your family's company. Your sister was meant to be that connection. But when I learned she was planning to run..." He shrugged. "I anticipated you might take her place." Joe felt dizzy. "You wanted me to deceive you?" "I wanted to see if you would." Thomas gestured to the chair across from him. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss, Josephine." Reluctantly, she sat. The wall behind him was covered with maps marked with pins and strings, dossiers on powerful figures, and complex flowcharts detailing corporate hierarchies. "Who are you, really?" she whispered. "Exactly who I claim to be. Thomas Reynolds, businessman." His smile was sharp. I simply neglected to mention the extent of my business, which is information, influence, strategic intervention." He leaned forward. "The world is a chessboard, Josephine. Most people are pawns, moving one square at a time in predictable patterns. Some are knights, or bishops, with more flexibility but still limited. I position myself as the hand moving the pieces." Asterisk, Joe's gaze traveled over the board again. Senators, CEOs, international diplomats, all connected through Thomas's careful annotations. "You're manipulating them, guiding outcomes. It's preventing worse alternatives." He opened a drawer and withdrew a folder with the Blackwood Company logo. Your family's business, for instance? Brilliant innovation, catastrophic management. Your father rejected advice from every consultant he hired. So you arranged to marry into the family? I approached Camilla honestly, explained I could save the company, offered a mutually beneficial arrangement. His expression hardened. She agreed, then panicked. And now you're stuck with me instead, Joe said bitterly. Thomas studied her. Am I? The sister who managed the company books when your father wasn't looking? Who created the efficiency protocols that kept you afloat last quarter? Who has been quietly making decisions while letting your father believe they were his ideas? Rendered Joe speechless. He knew everything. Don't look so surprised. Did you think I wouldn't investigate everyone connected to a potential business arrangement? He tapped a file with her name. You're the true business mind in the family. Camilla's departure may have been fortunate for us both. What do you want from me originally? Access to your family's technology patents and manufacturing capabilities. Now, he leaned back. Perhaps a genuine partner. You're asking me to help you manipulate people? I'm asking you to help me prevent disasters. Look at this. He handed her a tablet showing projection models. If your father maintained control, Blackwood would collapse within 6 months, leaving 300 employees jobless. My intervention has already prevented that. Joe reluctantly acknowledged the truth in his words. And these other interventions? Thomas guided her to a different section of the wall. This energy company was preparing to cut safety measures to boost profits. An anonymous tip to regulators and strategic stock movements convinced the board to change direction. He pointed to another cluster. This tech giant was developing surveillance software for an authoritarian regime. We redirected their focus to medical applications instead. We, small network of like-minded individuals. People who understand that sometimes the most important power is invisible power. Joe felt overwhelmed. Why reveal all this to me? Because you were clever enough to find this room. Because you've been watching, analyzing, since you arrived. His eyes met hers. And because I believe you understand what's at stake. He was right. The patterns on his wall told stories of corruption, exploitation, and dangerous consolidation. Of power and subtle countermeasures against them. What happens now? She asked. That depends on you. Thomas extended his hand. We can dissolve this marriage with generous terms to protect your family's company. Or we can form a true partnership one, based on mutual respect and shared purpose rather than deception. Joe stared at his outstretched hand, knowing her decision would change everything. Asterisk before I decide anything, Joe said, ignoring Thomas's extended hand. I need honest answers, complete transparency. Thomas withdrew his hand slowly. Fair enough. Were you arguing with on the phone earlier? What language was that? Mandarin. I was speaking with a business associate in Shanghai about redirecting a shipment of rare earth minerals away from a weapons manufacturer. He maintained unwavering eye contact. Next question. The locked wing. What else are you hiding? Nothing. Sinister. Living quarters for my security team, a communications center, and my personal laboratory. When her eyebrows rose, he added, I have degrees in chemical engineering and computer science that I rarely advertise. Joe moved to the wall of connections, pointing to a photograph of a distinguished gray-haired man. And him. What's your interest in Senator Holloway? Thomas's expression darkened. Holloway is accepting bribes to push legislation that would remove safety regulations for pharmaceutical companies. If successful, it would allow untested drugs to reach the market. So you're what? Blackmailing him? Not my style? Thomas tapped another photo connected to Holloway. I'm ensuring his primary challenger receives adequate funding and media attention. I'm also anonymously providing evidence of his corruption. 2 investigative journalists. Joe walked the perimeter of the room, examining each section of Thomas's elaborate web. Military contractors, technology companies, financial institutions, political figures all under his watchful eye. How did you build all this? She finally asked. The real story, not the simple millionaire fiction. Thomas was quiet for a moment. My father was wealthy, that part is true. But he made his fortune selling weapons to anyone who could pay, regardless of their intentions. When I understood what he was doing, I built my own network to track where those weapons went. Who they hurt. You were working against your own father? He died before he discovered my interference. I inherited everything and immediately began dismantling his operation. Thomas's voice remained steady, but Joe saw pain in his eyes. I learned how easy it is for one person with resources to cause immense harm. I decided to use those same resources differently. Joe sank into a chair, processing everything. Why the act? The simple, unassuming persona. People underestimate those they don't perceive as threats. They speak freely, guard less carefully, never suspecting that the quiet man in the corner is mapping their vulnerabilities. His lips quirked. Besides, it's peaceful, being underestimated. Except by your wife, Joe said dryly. For the first time, Thomas laughed genuinely. Except by my wife. Though to be fair, you're not the wife I expected. No, Joe acknowledged. I'm not. The silence between them stretched, filled with unspoken possibilities. You still haven't answered my question, Thomas, finally said. What happens now? Joe stood, walking to the window. Darkness had fallen completely. She could see their reflections superimposed over the night sky. Two strangers bound by circumstances neither had fully chosen. I need to know one more thing, she said, turning back to him. Why did you warn me about my sister's plan to flee? Could have let the wedding fail, found another way to access our company. Thomas's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Because I read your file, your innovations, your determination, I thought perhaps. What? Perhaps you were someone who might understand what I'm trying to do, someone who might choose to be part of it if given the chance. The honesty in his voice struck her more powerfully than any of his revelations. This brilliant, dangerous man had seen something in her before they'd even met. Our marriage is based on a lie, she said quietly. Most relationships begin with people presenting carefully curated versions of themselves, Thomas countered. We've simply accelerated past that stage. Joe laughed, despite herself. Is that what you call this? Accelerated honesty. Would you prefer we had spent months circling each other, gradually revealing our true selves? Perhaps, Joe admitted. But that's not the path we're on. Thomas approached her, stopping at a respectful distance. Then what path would you choose? Now, Josephine Reynolds? Knowing everything you know? Joe met his gaze steadily. I choose to stay. To understand this world you've built. To see if your methods truly serve the greater good as you claim. And if you decide they don't, then I'll change them, she said simply. You wanted a partner, not a subordinate. That means I get a voice in how this operates. Thomas studied her face, something like admiration flickering in his eyes. Is that your condition? One of them? Joe stepped closer. No more secrets between us. No more locked doors. We renegotiate our marriage terms. Agreed, he said without hesitation. Anything else? Yes, Joe said, feeling a strange surge of confidence. I think it's time I properly met my husband. Don't you? She extended her hand. Hello. I'm Josephine Blackwood Reynolds. I'm inventive, strategic, and apparently married to a mastermind. Pleased to finally meet you. Thomas took her hand, his grip firm and warm. Thomas Reynolds, more complicated than advertised. Honored to make your acquaintance. For the first time since this charade began, Joe felt something genuine pass between them, a connection beyond deception and discovery. A beginning. Asterisk. 3 weeks into their peculiar marriage, Joe was elbow-deep in financial projections when Thomas entered the study they now shared. She had transformed half the space, introducing her own organizational systems alongside his elaborate networks of influence. The Singapore deal is finalized, he announced, setting a folder beside her laptop. Your redesign of the manufacturing process cut costs by 22%. Joe smiled without looking up. Before, you missed the energy efficiency adjustments. On page 16, he examined the document again, then chuckled. So I did. Impressive. Their working relationship had evolved rapidly. Joe had spent days reviewing Thomas's operations, questioning his methods, challenging his assumptions. To her surprise, he welcomed the scrutiny, adjusting strategies based on her input. Their personal relationship remained more cautious, separate bedrooms, carefully maintained boundaries, and a growing friendship built on mutual respect rather than romance. "We need to discuss the Holloway situation," Thomas said, pulling up a chair beside her. "The journalist we provided information to is publishing tomorrow. There will be fallout." Joe nodded. "I've prepared contingencies for the Blackwood contracts that might be affected. We should alert our distribution partners in the Midwest." "Already done?" Thomas hesitated. "There's something else. Your father called this morning, asking to meet with us, both of us." Joe tensed. She had maintained minimal contact with her family since the wedding, uncertain how to navigate her complicated, new reality. Did he say why? No, but his tone suggested urgency. 3 hours later, they sat across from Richard Blackwood in Thomas's home office. Joe's father looked smaller somehow. His confidence diminished since the company's near collapse. "I'll be direct," Richard said after declining offers of refreshment. "Camilla has returned." Joe felt Thomas stiffen beside her. "When?" she asked. 2 days ago. She claimed she made a terrible mistake." Richard avoided meeting their eyes. "She wants to reclaim her place." The implication hung in the air.
Ow.
Joe felt a hysterical laugh building in her chest. "She wants to reclaim her place as Thomas's wife. She feels terrible about what happened." Richard finally looked at Joe. "She doesn't know you took her place. She thinks Thomas refused to go through with the wedding after she fled." "I see," Thomas said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You're here to suggest what exactly?" Richard shifted uncomfortably. "An annulment would be simple. Your marriage has only just begun. Camilla could step in as originally planned, and no one would need to know about the ... irregularity." "Irregularity," Joe repeated flatly. "That's what you're calling your scheme to commit fraud?" "It was an act of desperation," Richard protested. "The company was failing. Your mother's medical bills were mounting. We needed Thomas's investment, which you now have," Thomas observed. "So why this sudden desire to substitute one daughter for another?" Richard hesitated too long before answering. "Camilla is heartbroken. She realizes she made a mistake." "Stop lying," Joe interrupted. "What's really happening?" her father deflated. "Camilla discovered that Thomas controls more than just his family fortune. She believes a connection to him would be advantageous for her future endeavors." "My sister doesn't have endeavors," Joe said. "She has expensive tastes and impulsive decisions." "She's changed," Richard insisted. "She's been networking with investors, developing business contacts." "Who told her?" "About me?" Thomas asked sharply. "About my true operations?" Richard paled. "I don't know what you mean." Thomas leaned forward. "Your daughter fled our arranged marriage, then suddenly returned with knowledge of my actual influence and a desire to connect herself to it. Someone informed her who..." Joe watched her father crumble under Thomas's intensity. "A man approached her in Vienna, said he knew Thomas Reynolds wasn't what he appeared to be. Said he could help her reclaim her position if she would provide certain information once she was established in your household." Joe and Thomas exchanged glances. "What was this man's name?" Thomas asked. She wouldn't say, only that he was very convincing. After Richard left, promises of discretion extracted and Thomas's investment in the family business secure, regardless of their decision, Joe paced the study. "This is a targeted move against you," she said. "Someone trying to place a spy in your household." Thomas nodded, already pulling files. "I have several theories about who might be behind it." Joe stopped pacing. "You don't seem concerned that my sister and father were planning to manipulate you, because they failed," he said simply. "Thanks to you." She studied him, this man who had become her partner in ways neither of them had anticipated. "What do we do now?" "Identify the threat and neutralize it. Standard procedure." He glanced up. "Unless you're considering your father's proposal to dissolve our marriage so my sister can spy on you for an unknown enemy." Joe shook her head. "Hardly." Relief flickered across his features before his professional mask returned. "Then we proceed as partners. We investigate this threat together." Later that night, after hours of reviewing potential adversaries, Joe found Thomas on the terrace, gazing at the stars. "I've been thinking," she said, joining him at the railing, "about what this marriage has become. And we entered it as strangers. Participating in a fraud? We've become allies working toward shared goals. She turned to face him. I'm beginning to think we could be more. Thomas studied her face in the moonlight. More partners in every sense? Joe took a deep breath. These past weeks, working alongside you, I've felt more alive, more purposeful than ever before. What we're building together matters, and you matter to me. Thomas reached for her hand, his touch uncharacteristically tentative. Had hoped, but didn't want to presume. No more presumptions, Joe said. Just truth between us. I choose this life, this partnership. Not because of circumstances or family obligations, but because of who we are together, even knowing the dangers. He asked softly. Someone is already moving against us. Double quotes, Joe smiled, especially knowing the dangers. Haven't you heard? One married. A brilliant mastermind. She stepped closer. Fortunately for both of us, he got more than he bargained for in return. Thomas laughed, a genuine sound of joy that transformed his usually serious face. Indeed I did, as his lips met hers for their first real kiss. Joe knew they were forging something neither had expected: a marriage of equals, built not on deception, but on the most surprising foundation of all. Truth together they would face. Whatever came next, not as pawns in someone else's game, but as the masterminds writing their own rules. Asterisk.